All right. Seems like we made it to the other side. Very good.
You
All
did.
right. Fantastic. And seeing a few people joining here. So let us get going. Welcome everyone to What's Alive, a live conversation series here on Substack of about 30 to 45 minutes with leaders, with founders, and with experts about their journey, their learnings, and what they are burning for. This is for everyone who wants to build something even more alive. Uh, a bit of a background, maybe aliveness is a very important topic for me personally. It's connected to my purpose. It's connected to what I want to bring more of into this world. And it's connected to, of course, what I want to give space to in these kind of conversations. And I'm very happy to have Rachel Connor with me here today. Rachel is a space holder and a creative courage guide. She helps people understand the underlying patterns that hold them back from creating and start to speak, write, and act with more conviction and courage. So, Rachel, very happy to have you here as my guest. Very grateful to have you as my first guest on this kind of in this kind of setting. So, thank you very much and welcome.
Oh, thank you. No, it's wonderful to be here. I feel very honoured to be the first guest in this series. And there's something about aliveness, that really speaks to me also. So I had no hesitation in saying yes to this conversation. And I'm very happy to be here. Really good to be with you today.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Very cool. You know, it's like it was interesting when I was kind of preparing for our conversation. I don't know if you do it because I know you had these conversations in the past as well. I had to be careful not to kind of put on too much of my coaching hat. I was immediately going into kind of coach like conversation, like, oh, the questions and things like that. But there's one specific ritual from coaching that I do appreciate, and that's that we usually check in with the
Mm.
people who come on our calls. And this is actually something I would love to do with you as well. So as you're
Mm.
entering this space, like I'm curious, what is occupying your headspace? What is present in your heart space right now?
Mm. I love this too. And I do a similar thing of checking in and having some time to ground and arrive and be present. So, what I'm noticing
Mm,
is in my head, there's like, I've got a little residue of some of the things I've been doing this morning, conversations with clients. I had one session just before we checked in. And actually, it was a really good session. And she's really overcome something that she's been struggling with for a long time. So there's a kind of sense of part of my head
mm,
is still in that conversation and, um,
mhm.
covering what we covered in that conversation. Um, and then in my heart, there's this sense of the word aliveness is really resonant. So I'm feeling really quite alive. I'm feeling the energy of connection with you, Mark, having kind of met up just before we, went live. And although we've been in the same community for a while, we actually haven't spoken like this way. So there's a sort of sense of excitement. I can feel a kind of warmth around my heart space and a kind of openness to seeing where this conversation goes. Aliveness as in excitement and curiosity. So that's what's coming up for me in this moment.
Great, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. That's actually something I'm noticing in myself as well. The excitement and the curiosity
Mm.
about having you here and sharing that space for a while in this particular setting. One thing that made me really curious when I read about you is like the way that you introduce yourself, right? You say you describe yourself as a guide, as a creative courage guide, as a space holder. And it felt to me, like she's like deliberately not choosing the word coach or coaching in some sense. So I was just curious, what is behind that choice?
Yeah, thank you for asking this question. Um, I have to say, coach and coaching are terms that I've kind of struggled with for quite a few years, and so I
Mm,
think you're right in the sense that there is a kind of avoidance there. Um, why is that? So for me, coaching is something that, so firstly, the coaching industry, let's say, has really kind of developed and grown enormously, I think, over the last couple of decades. But coaching, I think, has its roots in this mainly, I guess, originally American context. It was used mostly in sports and then kind of transferred to business. And I think initially it was very much a kind of goal orientated, let's make progress, let's optimize for success and outcomes. Nothing wrong with outcomes at all, but I feel like the coaching that I do, the work that I do, is much more depth-based, let's say, much more presence-based. So, this check-in that we did at the beginning, like, where is your head? Where is your heart? Mm-hmm. It's that noticing what's here now. And there are elements of the coaching world and particular coaches who definitely bring that into coaching. But I feel for me, it distinguishes what I think is sometimes called like a self-improvement project, that coaching maybe sort of starts with what's wrong with this situation, what needs to be fixed. Let's go there and fix it together. When actually the way that I work, and some coaching does this too, I think, kind of deep transformational coaching kind of works with what's here right now. Where is the resistance? Where is the fear? Where is the, where are the parts of you that maybe you don't want to bring forward and that either are too afraid or want to stay hidden? Let's make space for those parts. So it's much more of a kind of holistic way, I think, of being with a person. And so I think of it as a guide because I'm in that space with the other person, that we're co-creating that context and that container together and holding space for that, and me being a very present witness to that process in the client. That's really what I feel I'm doing. So working at depth, working with the whole person, being a witness, and whether I'm working one-to-one with people, or I also have a community as well, which is called the Creative Courage Circle, where, we very much are about witnessing the other person, not fixing what needs to be fixed, not suggesting or advising or, offering unsolicited advice. It's really about holding space for what wants to emerge. Who are you becoming is a question that I use quite a lot when I sit with people. So that's part of the answer. And then also there's something as well around really claiming in a way that integrates all of the kind of the journeys that I've been on, or the things that I've done in my professional life. So in my former career, if you like, I was a university professor. And so the spaces that I would hold were, classroom spaces, seminar spaces. And I realized actually early on in my kind of coaching career that actually that was coaching just as much as sitting in a conversation, in a coaching context was coaching as well. So in a way, I'm kind of, I guess, honoring the ways that I've held space for people all the way through my professional life. I've been holding spaces in a way since my 20s. I just wasn't called a coach. And so, I feel like that's a way to integrate all of the ways that I've worked with people, supported people, helped people move through resistance or to move on. And, again, I'm not saying that we don't need to take action, but to really begin from that place of presence and witnessing, I think, is really important. And that really characterizes the way that I work with people.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I love both of the like the space holder, like even also when you're a facilitator, or I'm working with teams or with groups of leaders sometimes, and then holding the space is sometimes all that's needed in some sense. There's an art to it. There's as you said, there's a presence as something that you need to bring into the space in order to hold that space, and yet sometimes that's all that's needed, and that sounds like so little, and yet it is so profound in many ways, right? I'm sure you're witnessing that with what you're doing now with the circle that you're building right now.
Absolutely. And I think it's about attuning to what's going on in that group or that circle as
Mm,
well as with
hmm
one-to-one clients too. It's attuning to, okay, what is needed in this moment, which is different from, or part of, I think, a really a deeper way to do facilitation, which is, I'm actually constantly
hmm
checking in and kind of checking I don't know, the vibration, if you like, or the energy of what's coming up in that space. And so that's the
hmm
difference, I think, is to be attuned, yeah. So I agree. It can be a really important way to sort of bring forward what needs to be brought forward in that moment. Yeah.
hmm Mm. Yeah, I'm actually curious about that. Like, what makes holding space so, like, it feels like that's really important to you. Like, what makes
Mm.
that so important to you?
It's back to aliveness. I think it's back to
Hmm
aliveness. I think if I can hold space, I provide a container for connection, for
hmm
insight, for presence, so
hmm
that people can kind of move through an experience. So there's something that's important to me. I think this is one of the things that I've been kind of maturing into as I've got older. So my early experience of holding space was, in a kind of tutorial room with a bunch of university undergraduates, and that's holding space. There's
hmm
learning that happens there, there's connecting that happens there.
mm
But as I progressed,
mm
through my different kind of versions of myself and evolved, into the work I do now, there's something about, I think one of my superpowers is to really hold a robust structure and to notice what's happening and to be very present in terms of boundaries and to notice so that the magic can happen. So it's not like I'm making the magic happen. I'm holding the
mhm,
container in which the magic happens for the other person or people. It's almost
mm
like clearing the space so that other people don't have to worry too much about that. I love doing that. And I think it's that sense of giving a gift to the other people and to myself, because I love it. I feel very alive when I'm in that situation. It's aliveness, it's energetic, it's, yeah, energizing. It feels nourishing to me too. So I feel like I have a gift for it, and also
mm
I feel incredibly fed by it for myself too.
mhm,
Mm.
mm.
Yeah, I mean,
Beautiful.
I'm curious about you as well, like how that works for you as well. Like, what's your experience of holding space?
It's well, you mentioned something really interesting that I was connecting to the work. Like I usually talk about, like, in a leadership or a team context, I often talk about like team chemistry, like chemistry. So what is
Mm.
happening like in this moment when things like really connect and start to emerge. And as you just said, like you cannot evoke, like, or you cannot like control magic to happen in that sense. And in the same way, you cannot kind of control, like you cannot say, okay, now chemistry, there you need to be, or there you need to happen. It's exactly as you said, you kind of hold the space for it, you give it a structure, and then you allow things to emerge. And if you do that well enough, at one point it will happen, sometimes a bit earlier, sometimes later, but that's kind of the idea. So I was kind of reminded to my own work with that in how you hold it,
Mm.
so the group starts, so there's a flow happening, and then it just becomes a positive vortex into something magical, as you mentioned it, or something, yeah, related to chemistry, as I talk about it. So so
Yeah,
yeah,
I love that.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
mm.
So good.
I'm I'm curious, right? You mentioned you evolved into that, and I'm like, when you look back over your life, like if we zoom out a little bit and we look back over your life, what would you say was a turning point? Or maybe there were a couple of ones, but what was a turning point that most shaped you into who you are today?
Mm. Yeah. That's a really tricky one because I feel like there have been multiple turning points, and perhaps there are for most of us. I mentioned that I used to be in the academic world, and twice I left, university institutions or an academic career. So I left the first time, and I was kind of, I found myself back in there, and then I left again. Before I sort of established my business, doing what I do now. So that those could be construed as turning points. And they were certainly important. If I hadn't left, my university career, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. But when I think about it, there's something that kind of is underneath all of that. And I think it's really the decision to go to university. And I know that many people might say, oh, well, that, of course, that's a turning point. Of course, that's a place where things change. And it was for many reasons. So I was the first person in my family, even my extended family, to go to university. It wasn't something that people like me did, so actually it was a big deal. It was life-changing in that sense of getting a good education. And that's important too, in terms of it gave me more possibility, more opportunity. But it's more than that. It's deeper than that, because I chose to study English literature. And so a turning point for me, like one of the main memories and affirming experiences of my life where I thought everything's going to be changed forever now, was sitting in a lecture, listening to the lecturer talking about this book that we were reading, and feeling this sense of excitement and openness and possibility. And I knew that I would never think in the same way again, that I was being shown how to think differently about things, or to see that there were different interpretations of things. And that, I think, that's enabled the evolution. I think if I hadn't had that experience of, I could think about my story or a story in this way, it's also possible to think about it in this way or this way. I think that's actually at the core of everything I've ever done. And when I've made changes later in life, it's because I see the possibility of another narrative or another path, forward through life. So, yeah, that idea of multiplicity, I kind of think of myself in a way as you mentioned the word chemistry, and I think there's an alchemy to the work that I do. And so I think, being a kind of narrative alchemist started there. And the moment I realized it was in that lecture hall, thinking, wow, okay, not just, I've made it to university. It's like, wow, I've made it to become this person. Like, how incredible is this? Life won't ever be the same again. So it was more than just excitement. It was, I could almost I couldn't see the future, but I could feel a possibility of different futures that I could live because I was in that experience.
Wow, that's powerful. And I love the word you said, narrative alchemist. Is that what you used?
Yeah. It's
I love it.
It's not like a label that I use, but maybe I should. It actually came up in conversation recently. Yeah, because I think that's like stories have always been important to me. I was a big reader as a kid, and like I say, I chose to read English at university and all of that. And I'm a writer. I've written stories, and I think a coaching conversation, if you like, or a session with a client, or holding space in a group is all about narrative and, alchemizing what comes up and allowing people to see the possibility of a different narrative, a different story for themselves. And so really it has its roots very much in that experience. And I think that's at the heart of everything I've ever done, actually, as a teacher, as a mentor, as a space holder, as a guide. Yeah. So narrative alchemy.
Oh, cool. A narrative alchemist, opening up possibilities. That's actually really, really powerful. I love the word like possibility. Sometimes in a leadership context, we talk to, like, also actually in the context of leadership narrative, I talk with leaders about like their purpose, their value, their vision, and then how they can like use that not only for themselves as a guiding post, but how that could like serve how they show up towards others, how they introduce themselves. Like I know a leader here in Bangkok, a senior leader, he always starts with his why, his how, and his what, always, every presentation he goes to. And he tells me that's the moments that most people come back to me after I give a talk. They're like, "Oh, that's really inspiring. Where this does this come from?" But I'm connecting this to possibility because in when we talk about vision, usually what I see like people do, and I'm curious if you see the same. If you talk about maybe like a future, many people are very quick at kind of transforming that into an expectation. Like this is my
Yes.
future, so this is where it should be. And what I
Yeah.
love about possibility, and I think this is the quote from Ben Zanders, like the orchestrator who you might know. I think
Mm,
he was yeah
I do. I know that book. Yeah.
something
Yeah.
said
Yeah.
something his The Art of Possibility is the book, and he talks something about like he talks about in the context of children, where he said we don't give children a name as an expectation to live up to, but as a possibility to live into. And we kind of
Mm.
transform that and use, instead of using name, we say vision. A vision is not something as an expectation to live up to, but as a possibility to lean into. And this is what I love about the word possibility. What comes up for you, like in that
Yeah,
context?
yeah, I completely agree. It's back to, in a way, it kind of brings us back to the conversation about coaching, which is that kind of goal orientated, like, we have to achieve this
Hmm.
thing. The vision becomes a kind of compass point, or I don't know. I mean, the word North Star is used a lot, I think, in this context.
Yeah,
It's somewhere that you could head towards if you want to, but also there's the
yeah,
possibility of changing direction, or of kind of altering the vision. It's a place to head towards. And
yeah.
I feel like the narrative. So it's good to have. It's a bit like when you write a novel, which I have done. You know, some writers really need to have the end in mind, so they're not quite sure like how
Hmm.
they're going to get there, but they kind of have a sense of what they're writing towards. And so there's a kind of similar
Hmm.
aspect to that, I think. Here is like, oh, here's a possible end, not that it's the end, but here's a possible resolution to get to, but we just don't quite know how we're going to get there.
Hmm.
And I think that the
Hmm.
possibility is really important, to sort of hold the potential of that, and the kind of different various
Hmm.
ways in which you could get there, that are not set, that are very flexible, that allow for the evolution of a person, that allow for context shifting, of the world, of cultural structure of the work. I think it's really important to kind of hold those things lightly, while also having a sense of, this is what I'm here for. This is what I must stand for, in my life, in my work. This is what I want to do. Um, and so for me, the work becomes about, kind of inspiring people to have that vision, and also to do the work of, again, this is where the narrative alchemy comes in, I think, is to kind of say, okay, well, then what's in the way of that? And so then we like begin to kind of work through the different narratives of resistance, of fear, of, what is stopping that possibility? What are the kind of
Hmm.
core wounds, if you like? Certainly for creatives, that's a real crucible, to use that alchemy language. Creativity is a crucible.
Yeah.
It's a place where you have to take a hard look at yourself, where you're constantly tested in terms of resolve, in terms of, am I good enough, all of that kind of stuff. And so
Hmm.
the narrative work begins to sort of peel away the things that get in the way of feeling fully alive and heading towards that vision.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. That's great. And actually that actually brings me to like something else I had in mind. You might have already touched on that in some sense, but you are working with artists, I guess, with leaders, with like a range of people, and I could
Mm.
imagine they come to you being stuck from in some sense, or in some situations.
Mm.
And so I'm curious, as you just started to maybe go into that, like what have you learned about the human side of your work that most people miss or maybe underestimate?
Mm. Yeah, I think it's to do with the power of really fully embracing who we really are. So there's a kind of wholeness and integration, that if we are
Hmm.
brave enough, so that's the creative courage piece, if we're brave enough to look in the mirror and see the difficult bits, the challenging bits, the resistance, the fears, and kind of name, for example, imposter syndrome, for want of a better phrase. I'm not good enough to do this.
Mhm.
Who would even want to read
Mhm.
this thing? Who's going to want to listen to me speak on a stage? That kind of stuff. To really explore that in a very holistic way, to go to the kind of core wounds that those stories are founded on. And that, I think, certainly in the
Mhm.
creativity space where I work, that there
Mhm.
aren't
Mhm.
really many people who are prepared to kind of go to that place of that inner work. That, yes, we can talk
Mhm.
about, optimizing creativity by putting the right conditions in place, by having the strategies, the resources, the systems. For sure, we need those things too. But I think to really embrace the whole of who we are, and to look that in the face, and to have the courage to do that, that's where I think, yeah, that's the human side of things. And that, I think, is important, because otherwise the fixes, or the solutions, or the behaviors or the actions
Mhm.
are founded on something that's external, rather than that kind of deeper inner alchemy that happens, that kind of acknowledging who we are, of naming the fear. Um, and increasingly, I guess I'm beginning to think of it as a kind of healing, in a way as well, of the
Mhm.
person being able to heal those narratives. And in some cases as well, it stretches beyond that individual person. Yes, we all have our defense mechanisms. We assume these behaviors. We adapt in order to survive and to thrive, and maybe hide ourselves behind masks in order to
Mhm.
kind of do that. So there's a kind of individual aspect to this. And also, I think we all carry these ancestral traces of these
Mhm.
stories and wounds that again need attention. And often we're not conscious of them at all. And so to kind of create a space where that kind of conversation can happen, where that kind of realization,
Mhm.
can be had, then there is a kind of healing process that can happen, that can be really powerful. And then the energy can move
Mhm.
through. So it really connects with the topic of aliveness, because if we name
Mhm.
that fear, if we're allowed to explore it in a place that's in a space that's trusted and is supported, then that energy moves through and it loses its power. The fear loses its power,
Mhm.
and then the expression then is often more free, more easeful, and then we become
Mhm.
more of who we are. So that's the holistic piece, I think. That's a long answer
Mm.
to your question. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah,
yeah, that's yeah.
absolutely. No, it's and there's so many things I would love to like dig a little bit deeper in there. There's so many very fascinating things you said. One thing that I'm curious about, you mentioned it a little bit in the middle, that well, it takes courage. Like, so what you mentioned, like that's why you're
Mm,
also like a courage guide. It
mm,
need people need to be brave in order to look there. And you also said some people are not ready to kind of look there, or to
mm,
go there. I'm
mhm.
curious, in your experience, what brings people to that level of readiness where, like, oh, now what needs to shift in order for them to open up to this kind of work?
Yeah, I think it's when the pain of having to pretend becomes too great. So
Hmm.
there's a wonderful quotation from a French writer called Anaïs Nin, who says something about, I'm kind
Hmm.
of paraphrasing, but it's something about when, bursting, it's about bursting from the buds, when the pain of staying in the buds is greater than the pain of kind of bursting forth. So
Hmm.
it takes courage and bravery to move out of that space, to really address the issues of what's holding you back. And I think there's a tipping point often for people, and so people have to be ready. It's like they've reached a point where it's just too painful in some way for them to stay
Hmm.
in that same stuck pattern, and that there's a yearning and a longing for change and for expression. And when the person's right, right for that, and when they're ready, then there's an alignment, and it's like, off we go. Then we can do some really good work together. But not everyone is ready.
Hmm.
And so some people maybe do a little bit of work and then kind of pause, and that's great, and it's like there's no hurry to get to anywhere. Occasionally I might have connection calls with people, and I never really know what the impact of that work might be. I might never see them again, and it might
Mhm.
just be a door that's
Mhm.
opened, even just slightly, for them to maybe even glimpse a sense of that possibility, or a different way of thinking, or doing something. And that's just as valid, and it may be that I'm not the right person to work with, and they then, process some of
Mhm.
that and then go off and work with someone else. But I think it's when it becomes too much of a burden to hold on to those past stories. And it's painful
Mhm.
because, to put it in a nutshell, the soul needs to express. And so, the pain of
Mhm.
the soul not being able to express is the thing that creates the shift, or the readiness for the shift.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to know how
Thanks for
you
sharing.
see that in your work, like the readiness for people to work. I'm curious about, your work too.
It is like, at least in part, related to that. It's like some people come to me and there is a certain, let's say, form of pain, like that could be just being like super energy deprived, or something, most of the time happening on a physical level at some point, where they have an impact and they're like, oh, that's something is not working anymore. For some, it comes as a big surprise, and it's almost like that the outside pressure of whatever that means for a founder or leader going through a growth stage or a change of roles or whatever it is, like that kind of pressure becomes too much for the capacity to handle it, and then something kind of breaks, or how to say, spills over into that part when they're like, oops, and now I'm in an energetic state where I need to do something about it. So in that sense,
Mm.
it might not be as much of a, like, the deep pain of expression that you mentioned, but there's for sure like a pain signal telling them, okay, now I need to do something. And I think for the other people that come to me, it's different. It's a different kind of pain. It's more like they want to be further than where they are now. So they're actually doing
Mm.
quite well, and they're just realizing that more of the same doesn't work anymore. So usually I work with quite
Mm.
performance-oriented people. They're super inspiring, very competent, and they want to grow beyond where they are now. And
Mm.
this is their starting point. And interestingly enough, only once you kind of start to dig a little bit deeper, then something starts to be revealed that is often, maybe, well, I don't want to say more painful than they expected, but certainly has a different quality than they expected. They
Yeah.
didn't expect that they need to go there or to look there in order to shift things. So,
Yeah,
mm,
yeah. I think that's quite similar in a way. There's this sense of like knowing that there's something more, that there's more to be evolved into. This kind of sense of, an expectation, or a prompting, an inner prompting that there's something else
yeah,
beginning to emerge. I think that's a similar thing. Um, yeah,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
Mm.
One other thing that you mentioned that I'm curious about. Oh, and by the way, just say Phil, hi, hey everyone, hey
Hey,
Caroline and
Phil.
Phil, also here, welcome.
Yeah, good
And
to see you.
what yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being here. You mentioned like healing also as part of your answer
Mm.
before, and like everything that you talked about from the very beginning sounds a lot like, oh, there's that's a healing journey, and on so many
Mm.
levels. And yet the
Mm.
way you talked about it, it sounded that healing only became kind of part of your narrative, maybe, and in that sense, a little bit later or along the way. I'm not sure if I got that right, but it sounded that it's
Mm.
particularly important right now, or it's starting to opening or to emerge. Like, what does it mean, like, for you? Or how did it open up? Or when did you shift towards, oh, this is actually really, really more deeply healing than I maybe even thought?
Yeah, this is a really pressing question for me. It's something I'm really immersed in right now. This inquiry about healing, both my own personal journey of healing, and also, to what extent healing is a part of the way that I support people and work with people. So I love that you spotted that. Thank you. And thank you for the invitation to talk about it. Um, yeah, for me, I think, it's probably quite a common thing that I'm now in like the second half of life, and I can really like look back on my earlier life and see those points of those flashpoints, the decisions that I made, the actions that I took, the relationships that I was in, that were kind of that I I was in those places from a more unconscious place and carrying a lot of the sort of burdens of my past and, limiting beliefs, or like I use the word wounds, core wounds, both my own and the ones that I'd inherited, from my parents and even further back. I've become much more conscious of those in the second half of my life. And I guess there are various things that have happened to me where I've been, invited into situations where I've really had to dig in and find a place where I had to heal those stories. So money is a big story for me that I've had to heal, kind of, sort of past beliefs or thoughts or experiences. It's become a kind of laboratory in a way where I've experimented and had to really look at, okay, I'm moving away from a regular salary, a good salary as an academic. And now I'm in this business, I'm self-employed, I'm making my own money, and that has been, I think, the single most challenging and yet healing process that I have been in, I think, in my life in a certain way.
Mm.
And I could talk about
Mm.
relationships as well and all of that stuff. But another thing to say, I think, is that as I undertake my own healing, I'm also aware of the capacity that I want to grow to help other people heal also. And so I'm really beginning to embrace my own, I wouldn't say identity, but my own capacity to use these modalities of healing that really serve and support other people. And there's a part of me that really has resisted that for such a long time. Like, oh, I'm a this or I'm a that, or I'm a coach, I'm a this, I'm a that. But actually the work that we do, the experience of working in the session, either in one-to-one or situation or in groups, is a deeply healing one. And so I'm in this space in my life where I really want to develop that capacity. Yeah. And really, I'm not healing anyone. I am there to create the conditions for that person or those people to heal. And so really it's looking at those narratives that we talked about earlier, and alchemizing those narratives so that they can change the story, so that they can connect more to possibility and the fullness of expression, and that they're more available to create the vision for a more joyful life. And that's it. And so I think the healer piece is really coming in quite strongly, and I have no doubt that that's going to really characterize the rest of my life, in terms of my work and what I do and how I want to help people.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, beautiful. Like it's like how your own experience shapes what you want to give space to or hold the space for other to work through as well. And I love that you use the word capacity. I actually like to play with that word a lot, as also in the leadership space, there's still a lot of talk about skills and capabilities, but a lot of the work actually comes from capacity and capacity expansion, right? To be with more could be to be with more pain, to be with more pressure, to be with more complexity, whatever it is. And so, especially with like also leaders that I work with who are growing, they need to increase not only what they do, but actually their capacity to be with more. And so it sounds like that you are in a process yourself of like doing that, so you can hold even more space for others to walk through that as well.
Exactly. That, I think that's so well said. That's to be with more, and that's the holism, the holistic like approach of like, inviting all of the things, to be with more of yourself. So yeah, I love that. That's a great phrase. I might borrow that one, Mark.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead. All good. All good. Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, and go with the narrative alchemist. Don't forget about that one. I really would love you to play with that. That's a beautiful kind of term. Like as we are like almost a little bit coming to a close, there's one last question I'm really curious about, and maybe actually probably you've already gone into that direction a bit, but with everything that you've lived, that you've learned, that you're now like the path that you're on with the healing process, like what are you really burning for right now? like burning? It's like, what are you building or creating where you're like, oh, there, this aliveness is really starting to shine through, and I'm just burning for that?
Yeah, this is such a great question. Thank you. Yeah, it's a really great question. So the healing piece is definitely burning in me. I think it's like I'm being invited
Mm-hmm.
into a way of working, a way of being in my life that is it is burning. Literally, it's like it's very alive. It's very
Mm-hmm.
vibrant. It's very there's a lot of warmth and heat around it. And what I'm building in that phase is firstly. I'm planning a retreat, an in-person retreat for next year, which I'm very excited about. This
Mm-hmm.
feels like an evolution of my offerings, of my work, and there's no question in my mind that it will be a place, a space, an experience that invites people into their own healing around their expression, their creativity, who they're becoming. So that's the first thing, and that is, the vision, and this is kind of with Phil and Carolina's help, who are on this call. It's definitely very much a kind of compass point. So setting the vision for that means that I think it will have an effect on the way I work now with people, something to work towards and build towards. So having a healing space, building a healing space, a kind of temporary community, if you like, of people who will gather for 4 or 5 days or whatever. That's definitely burning in me. I'm so excited about that. And I have found the most amazing location to do that work. So that's exciting. And all of that is part of a bigger vision, which I think is beginning to also emerge right now, which is about how do we learn how to be in community with each other? And I feel like the way the world is heading, with all of the crises that we've got, with certainly the climate emergency, we are going to be forced to live life differently and live in community in ways that we perhaps haven't considered, haven't thought about. We're going to rely on each other for resources. And I feel like part of what's burning in me is an opportunity to support people to learn how to be more whole and more alive in themselves, so that we can all live together, live alongside each other more effectively and more in support of, community, I suppose, in a way. So, part of the longer term vision might be, for example, to, build or to run or to have a retreat center where groups can come and kind of learn about, narrative alchemy and how it can help us and how we can actually live together more peaceably, more in unity. I don't know. I think the world will need to know how we can all support each other, in groups, because that's, I think, what we're going to be. We're going to have to face that. So it's about resourcing people in that way, or encouraging people to resource themselves, not just with the practical things around how to build and how to grow food that will survive hotter temperatures, but how do we leverage our skills of communication and being together and live a different kind of life in a way. So that's a kind of longer term thing, but all the work that I do, I think, I can see now is working towards that. That in itself is healing. How do we heal each other? Being in community. So yeah, that's what I'm burning for, Mark.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I
Mm.
can sense it how you're burning for it. I'm sure that you're igniting others' hearts and their fire as well with that kind of fire in you. So, for
Mm.
those who would like to like learn more about like the community that you mentioned that you're creating, the retreat, I saw the picture as well. Beautiful location, by the way. Thanks for sharing them
Thank
in the
you.
chat. So very nice.
Yeah.
Where can I find more about you?
Substack is the place to go. I have a website, but it feels like I've outgrown that website. I feel like I've evolved like twice more since I first
Yeah.
set that up. So really, Substack is where to find me. I write there every week, and the retreat it's very early. It's a very the seeds are being sown, but it's very early days, and so I will no doubt be sharing about that there. My community, the Creative Courage Circle, is all the information is there on Substack. There's a separate page that talks about how people can work with me. So yeah, go to my Substack, have a look at the writing. I write a lot about, witnessing and supporting, and, this sort of whole thing about how do we integrate these different parts of ourselves. That those are really key themes in the writing that I do. So it's all there on Substack. And if you want to find out more, reach out. Like, I'm always up for, I love conversations. I love conversations like this one. And I'm really open to connecting, not necessarily with a view to becoming a client, but just, hello, what are you burning for? I love these kind of conversations that make me feel very alive. I think there's a lot of aliveness in this kind of conversation. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I can only confirm that. Yeah, you were so even like for this conversation, so you were so quick and open to jump on it, which I was very grateful for. So I can tell that you love conversations, and it's so lovely to hear. Like, you're doing such important work. So I would love for more people to actually know about you. There's one question left, like a short one, and theoretically, but take as much space as you need. There's a specific question of just how I would like to end these kind of calls, and it's a simple one. And feel free to share whatever is like comes to your mind or to your heart. And so, after we've talked now for about 45 minutes, to bring this call to a close, what's alive for you right now?
There's the joyful aliveness of connection. So I'm really feeling very connected to you, and the resonances. The word resonance comes up. The resonance between the work that you do, the work that I do. We work in different spaces, but I feel like there's a real alignment there. So that gives me a lot of joy and aliveness, and also what comes up is possibility as well. That word, we've used it a couple of times now. I feel very inspired, and there's a lot of, I feel it in my body actually. There's this kind of rush of momentum that I want to go away and kind of create after this conversation, kind of come back to my retreat vision and kind of like scribble in my notebook and do a little bit more of, kind of thinking and visioning about that. So aliveness, the joy of connection and possibility is what comes up as we end this conversation. So thank you.
Beautiful.
It's been wholehearted and very easeful, very joyful, great questions, really, really important questions, I think, to bring to this space. So I've loved it, Mark. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. Thank you a lot. It was lovely to have you on. And thank you for everyone who joined and gifted us with their time as well. Thank you for being here, and wishing everyone a lovely rest of the day. Very good. Take care,
Mark.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rachel. Bye-bye.
Bye.